please do take your seats, and we will start. First of all, I would like to express great gratitude for the group of very fine gentlemen that we have tonight with us here. And I'm also very happy that I can greet His Excellency Ambassador of Qatar, who have joined us today for this conversation, and of course our dear students who are with us today, the colleagues from International Office, and not to forget the colleagues from MKI of Hungarian Institute for International Affairs, with whom we are realizing this project. Actually, this is the last of the series of the panel which we had this semester, initiated by MKI and Center for Geopolitics of MCC and MKI. And I'm really happy that somehow we just reminded that within several days there will be 1 year since the change of the government in Syria. So it's very interesting time to speak about what are the outcomes and what are the results of that year. But as we all know, there are permanent developments within the Middle East, and we tried a little bit optimistically, but it's always good to hope for the best, to speak about peace. And generally, is peace possible? Of course, we do trust to President Trump that he will bring the peace to the world, because he is trying hard to solve it. How many wars? Several of them. But in the meantime, until he finishes all of that, we have to survive and to see what is really going on. So in that sense, I'm really happy, first of all, to present you the gentlemen we have today. Let me start with our friend from Turkey, Professor Hüseyin Bağcı, who I can really call my friend for several years. We are cooperating quite well. I had the chance to visit Metro University and so on. His biography is, if I could say, more than full of very different stuff. Just basically, he has been professor of international relations in Turkey for decades, if I could say. We just heard, that out of 1,700 people working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, more than 400 are actually his former students. So he is really doyen of the international relations science in Turkey, somebody who knows Middle East quite well, and also very important for today's debate, he's well known as a flying professor, actually. And somebody who is really going around, and just for the students, it's completely one thing when you listen to someone, and completely different thing when you go up to the field and see people understand what is happening. That's why I'm emphasizing his flying professorship. And speaking about the field, what to tell about the next person I have to present, actually on my right side is General Yossi Kuperwasser, who is, we're joking, former Israeli and IDF general, but you never get retired. After all, now he's formally retired, but actually still doing very serious job. He is leading Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, specializing in the security dimension of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Formerly, he was, of course, member of IDF, mostly in charge of military intelligence division and Director General of the Israel Ministry of Strategic Affairs. I could tell quite a lot. He's a public person, somebody who is writing also for Haaretz, for other very well-known publications, and so on. And last but not the least, I'm more than happy that we could give Hungarian contribution to this. As most of you know, Professor László Csicsmann is probably one of the most well-known experts for the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and the affairs. We're going to speak about that. Also, I had the chance to cooperate with some of his former students like Zoltán Egeresi, who are now contributing to the very big knowledge of Hungary and cooperation with Turkey countries, and so on and so on. And he's a professor at the Corvinus University, former vice rector, dean, and many other things. And not to forget also somebody who is researcher at MKI as well. So without further ado, I'm more than happy. I'm glad that we had also our friends from Turkey countries whom we had the chance to meet last week on fantastic conference on energy that Professor Csaba Moldic organized. And let me just briefly remind us of the dynamic for the last 15 years as some sort of introduction if tonight's panel. Actually, more or less we could go quite along in the history, but let's start with the so-called Arab Spring in 2010, which happened like 15 years ago, and it looks like it was half a century ago with the massive consequences, of which one is definitely massive migration crisis in 2015 in Europe, which has changed political landscape, ideological landscape, and so on and so on. But of course, much bigger developments were into Middle East and MENA countries generally. There was a series of the regime changes which brought quite a radical change, for example, in Egypt, a very important country in which we had the Muslim Brotherhood for several years in power, then army took it over and so on. But it took to the big insurrections in Libya, in Syria actually it started, and so on and so on. Just briefly after that, we could say that I remember in 2010-11, I organized in Belgrade some debate in which ambassador of Iran, in that sense, I remember he precisely said some people speak about that as Arabic Spring, but I'm quoting him, as the Islamic awakening. And from his perspective and perspective of Iran, it really turned out into quite a successful projection of the power until a couple of years ago. Iran was really having the proxies and being one of the most important players in Palestine, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon with his proxies, and so on and so on. And in 2012, of course, not to forget the other big powers started directly to be involved, including Russia that intervened in 2015 in Syria, and so on and so on. And just to not forget, in 2023, some really big event happened when Hamas attacked on October the 7th, made a big insurrection. We all know about the crisis, about the hostages and everything that has happened, which actually initiated quite a huge attacks and operations from the IDF and Israel. Actually, and we just spoke how many fronts, and I'm introducing, and the first panelist that I'm going to ask today, we spoke about how many fronts in the meantime Israel has opened, and I would ask General to give us, if I may say, a little overview where we are now with the fronts, what is happening in Gaza, in Syria from your perspective, and especially Yemen, that is still in a way very hot places where Houthis are still having direct confrontation with the IDF.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm now today not in this organization you mentioned. I moved into the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. I'm the head of this institute. And talking about fronts, we didn't open any front. All the fronts were opened by our enemies. We responded to the decision of our enemies to open all kinds of fronts against us. And it all was orchestrated by the Iranians, who built all these proxies around us and have moved towards having a tremendous capability to hit us with long-range missiles, both cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones. They prepared all kinds of capabilities to hit us, and they were working very hard on their nuclear project, getting closer and closer to having the capability to produce nuclear weapons. They were already accumulating something like 450 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium that was supposed to be enough for something like 10 to 12 nuclear bombs if they have enriched them to 90% and up and to a military grade. So this was the situation on October 7th. Now the Iranians believed that the time is not ripe yet to start a war. But Hamas, because of its own considerations, decided that this is already the time is ripe and they can start it. We were very fortunate that they started it before the rest of the people that were supposed to take part in that were ready. And that's why Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and the Yemenites were not fully prepared to launch the war at the same time. Hamas believed that they would join, that they should not only show solidarity, but will join with full force in this attempt to wipe Israel off the map. But it didn't happen, because everybody was following their own interests and not following Hamas' interests. So Hezbollah started launching rockets towards us and drones, but in a limited way. And Iran was cautious not to get directly involved, just by supporting others for the beginning of the war. Until April 24, they didn't get directly involved. In April 24, they launched their first attack against us from their own soil with 300 projectiles, some of them cruise missiles, some of them drones, some of them ballistic missiles. We were attacked in one night on the 13th of April by 300 projectiles from Iran. And the Yemenites, the Houthis in Yemen, started launching rockets towards us and missiles, and started to block the Red Sea entrance in the Bab el-Mandeb. And we were finding ourselves in many, many fronts simultaneously, and things happened in Syria, as we all know, in last year, was the jihadists taking over, and we understood that we are under threat from there as well. We had to take some precautionary steps. And terror was prevalent in the Judea and Samaria areas, the West Bank as you call it, and we had to deal with that too. Hamas believed that the people, the Palestinians living in the West Bank, are going to fully join them and start a war as well, but they didn't. They just carried out here and there terror attacks, but nothing out of the ordinary. Hamas believed also that the Arabs living in Israel are going to join like they did in the previous round in 21, but they decided not to join. But all of these are arenas that we have to be very careful about what's happening there. And we managed to deal with all these fronts simultaneously, although we did it one by one, not all of them at the same time. But eventually it all accumulated, and we dealt with all of them at the same time. And we managed to achieve tremendous achievements. This Iranian stranglehold over us didn't materialize, and it was totally broken. Iran lost its nuclear capabilities. Iran was suffering a lot of damage when it comes to its missile capabilities. The proxies are not there anymore to protect Iran. The idea behind it was that Hezbollah is going to serve some sort of deterrence against Israel to prevent it from launching an attack against Iran. Nothing happened. We were able to hit the Iranians without worrying about Hezbollah. We eliminated the leadership of Hezbollah. We eliminated the leadership of Hamas. We caused a lot of damage to the scientists of Iran, the nuclear scientists of Iran, and to some of its military leadership. We caused a lot of damage. And the deterrence that we were building on to make sure that nothing like 7th of October will happen re-emerged due to the achievements we managed to accomplish. But we have to remember 2 or 3 caveats on that. First, it was relatively easy to hit all this, relatively, it was not easy, but relatively easy to hit all these targets and cause this damage, because we have prepared ourselves for that for a long time. We knew that this was coming. So we have prepared the beepers and that you probably heard of. We prepared all kinds of other tricks that enabled us to outsmart our enemies that outsmarted us on October 7th. We managed to outsmart them and cause them a lot of damage. And this was relatively easy because we were, first of all, because we were prepared, and secondly, because it was not something existential for them. They are still alive. They were hit, but they are still alive, and they dream of re-emerging and regaining their power. The stage where we are now is the effort to defeat them, not only to hit them, but to defeat them. In order to have a better Middle East, we need to defeat those radicals, those fanatics. And in order to do that, we need more power and more cooperation from the Americans. And it goes in, just like we did in hitting them, we got a lot of American cooperation, and many others helped us. But for defeating them, we need more help. We need American help in Gaza, because we cannot finish this war before we defeat Hamas, making sure that they lose control of Gaza and give up their arms. Otherwise, that war is not going to come to an end. We have to make sure that Hezbollah is disarmed. The Lebanese government is ready to cooperate. They say they're going to do it by the end of the year. We don't have a lot of time left. And a lot of efforts are being invested in making sure this is going to happen. But Hezbollah is still very strong, strong enough in order to defy the Lebanese government and to stay in power. So the tensions are growing in Lebanon, and we might reach a stage where we have to do something in order to defeat Hezbollah and to make sure that they give up their arms so that Lebanon will be able to cooperate with us and build a better future for both of us.
Okay.
So just one word about Iran. Same goes to Iran. We have caused Iran a lot of damage. We did not defeat Iran, and we don't have any plan immediately to finish the job there. But definitely this has to be done, because as long as the Iranians are still dreaming of regaining their capabilities in the nuclear realm and regaining other terms of capabilities to hit us, then this is going to be a very shaky situation in the Middle East that may explode again. And this is a much more difficult task to defeat and not only to hit. And it goes along with tensions. Although we have a lot of common interest with the Americans, this issue of defeating goes along with tensions between us and the Americans and those specifics that we don't agree upon, and we have to bear that in mind as well.
Okay. We'll return to Iran specifically and American introduction. Thank you very much for a very clear stance on what do we have at the field and what are basically goals of Israel. Professor Bağcı, there are a lot of things here you could comment as well, but I would like to start with Syria. Actually, as you noticed, within a couple of days, we will have 1 year since, in a way, if I could say it internationally, unexpectedly fast, the former regime collapsed, and we had a new situation there at the field with Shara being in charge, but actually with a very interesting internal dynamic in which Israel, Turkey also have their own stances, position, and so on. Could you please introduce us to how do you see Syria and what is happening nowadays?
Thank you very much. It's fine, yeah, the voice? Okay. Good evening. I hope in the next 10 minutes I will entertain you intellectually from the perspective of what happens in Syria and where it will lead. It was, there is a saying in the Middle East, there is no war without Egypt and no peace without Syria. So Syria is very important for everyone there. And the second one, I would suggest a book, because we are in a university. William Burns, the first non-military, I would say, director of CIA. He was writing a book with the title, The Back Channel. In this back channel, I would suggest to everyone, in order to understand the America's foreign policy since 1980 until today. In this book, there is an anecdote. When James Baker was flying over Syria, Israel, Jordan, and he turned to his advisors and said, do you know, if there is a reincarnation, and if I come back to the world, I will become an expert of the Middle East. They said, oh my God, why? He said, because there's always a job. If you are a researcher, you have always a job. You will be not jobless. So Middle East is a problematic area in the world politics, and now Syria is coming into the picture. Next Monday, it will be already 1 year that the government of Ahmed Shara is in power, and Syria is a country which we have to see from different perspectives, not only from the Israeli side, but also the Iranians, Lebanese, Turks, Americans, British, Russians, name it, including the European Union. So the instability of Syria is a big problem for the entire Arab world too, because as one Bashar Assad said, you can kick me out from the Arab League, but you cannot take my Arab genetics. He speaks Arabic, is Arab, and Ahmed Shara is also, to me, an Arab nationalist. Is Islamist, as everybody thinks, but it is not. At the end of the day, he is the president of the country, which is the successor of the previous government with all these rights and responsibilities as a member of the United Nations. I think Turkey is the winner and the sufferer of Syrian case. Turkey has 3.6 million people from Syria, the biggest amount of the migrants. They are not intending to go back, most of them. Just 600,000 so far went back. And they are living in Turkey. I visit also in the country all the cities from Hatay to Antep to Urfa, name it. So we have 910 kilometers border, and Turkey is militarily also in Syria. The Syrian military and police forces will be educated now by Turkey. Turkey is one of the key players at the moment, what happens in Syria, but Turkey is not the main, let's say, money provider. Turkey is a security provider to Syria, but the money will come from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from American companies, as well as from Great Britain also there. Last week, we had two conferences, even concerning the infrastructure of Syria. The Turkish companies are there. The railway, highways will be done, and Syria will become part of this new economic sphere where the terrorism or radical movements will have no chance to exist. The Zeitgeist in German, spirit of time in English, is not allowing that radical groups, the non-state actors using weapons, will have a future there. So with the American President's Donald Trump's policies, it will be much more stronger. I think Syria is also one of the countries in the long run. The stability of the Syria is particularly important for Turkey because we have also many cross-border terror activities before, PKK and YPG. Now PKK is out of the game. The terror-free Turkey discussions are still going on. We will see whether it will be successful or not. But at the end of the day, coming back to Turkish presence and Turkish influence on Syria, on the particularly Ahmet al-Shara, is so important, so big, that you may not underestimate this. This year, in Antalya Security Conference, he was there. I was also participating at this conference. So he is not anymore the one who is having weapons with him, but having good tie and good suits, made in Turkey, of course. And also the Syrian, when you look to Syrian government now, you see how they are close to Turkey. Turkey is the first country which opened the embassy in the new government came to power. And Turkish foreign minister and the secret intelligence service directors are very good friends of Ahmet al-Shara. They know each other for years. And the Syrian army probably will be also not designed, but trained by Turkey, also the police forces. Now, this recent discussions, what Israel can do, whether Israel is getting Syria more bombed or occupy Syria, it will be not so easy because Israel has also its limitations. But you may not forget that foreign minister of Syria and the president, they work a lot. They travel the entire world. And he was also in American president's house, White House. He was praised before Prince bin Salman was bringing him together in Saudi Arabia. I think Arab countries have also a great interest that Syria is now part of this new emerging order of the Middle East. What Mr. General told about Israeli politics is another thing, but looking from a Turkish perspective, the Turkish foreign and security policy to the Middle East is also revising itself. Turkey is actually supporting, at least in the rhetoric, Hamas, but at the same time, beyond the closed doors, Turkey is one of the negotiators together with Saudi Arabia and Qatar for the peace process, including Egypt. So Israel has to take this into account, and we may not forget that Syria is a country which has more impact around itself if it is unstable. We call these type of countries pivotal countries. And concerning the energy lines, including Iraqi development road, which is still going on, if this type of energy supplies will be provided from Middle East to Europe via Turkish territory, which is also another point in energy case that Turkey's map in the new map of the energy lines definitely playing an important role. Maybe last sentence, that Turkey is now providing very strong infrastructural help to Syria. Turkish Airlines flies every day, and Azerbaijani gas with Turkish pipelines will be delivered now to Syria. Should we be pessimistic in the long run? No. I'm like Miša, very optimistic, but always with carefulness.
Thank you very much. I wanted to intervene in the sense that we're going to definitely return to the question of energy that is substantial, as we heard at the last week and this fantastic conference, like on Iraq issue that is very interesting also after that. But before that, speaking about, we heard Israeli position, we heard Turkish position, and I'm really happy that at this moment when the dynamic between Israel and Turkey is very interesting about the future of the Middle East, as Iran, as a third, let me say, important regional power, retreated, as we heard from the general here. But of course, coming from Hungary and from Europe, if we could speak about some general European position on that, I would like Professor Csicsmann to give us this perspective, because it's of course connected with geopolitics, with energy and so on, but also with the things that were directly influencing, like immigration, threat, and other kind of stuff. Please. Professor.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. Of course, it's not easy to say something on the European aspect in a few minutes, but let me start from the point of view that European Union is acting in the Middle East in a double capacity. It's a normative player where our principles, democracy, human rights, rule of law, and that kind of things are very important to be part of the foreign relations. And second, of course, it's a realpolitik actor in the region with its own interest. And sometimes these two principles are not aligned, so sometimes divergence that we can see and conflict between the normative position and the real politics. So this is my first message, and unfortunately I'm very skeptical with the European Union's position. So if we look from the Middle East, the region, which are the external player, there is, as you mentioned, the United States, India, China, Russia, of course, and we have the European Union. But I would say, despite its geographic proximity to the Middle East, unfortunately, it's not shaping the reality, the political outcome of the transformation of this region. And European countries are very much divided in many ways. For instance, this is the case with the Gaza war and the Gaza situation. We can see some individual countries like, for instance, Hungary has a very pro-Israeli foreign policy, but other countries very different and very critical with Israel, like Spain, and some other countries are in between these two approaches. So that's one of the problems, that the European Union doesn't have a unified voice on the situation. Officially, the European Union is one of the largest donors of the Palestinian state, and it's not visible, but there is still a strong cooperation between the Palestinian Authority, the European Union providing assistance, training, and a lot of capacity for the two-state solution, which is still the official policy of the European Union. And it was one of the largest donors in Gaza, which was very much criticized by Israel, of course, that the European Union, in a way, has failed to introduce a kind of international aid system to provide a population without the role of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So definitely what we see in the Middle East, certain opportunities and challenges. Opportunities, of course, are the economic cooperation, fossil fuel, but only in a limited way, in my opinion, because especially when we are talking about the Gulf, the GCC region, there the export is much more towards the Asian countries and not because of geography and transportation cost and a lot of other things. But the Eastern Mediterranean basin has a huge importance from the energy perspective too, especially at the moment the European Union importing natural gas from Algeria, which accounts for 17% of the import of the European Union. So that's a significant amount, and of course the Maghreb is very different from the other side of the Middle East. And there is a certain kind of opportunity in this the Middle East gas cooperation. We started in 2019, Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus and Greece as well, which opposed by Turkey due to geopolitical issues. Turkey was very much left out from this cooperation. And there was a plan to build a EastMed pipeline, which was not anymore on the table. But what is still on the table is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which was launched in 2023, and the European Union still has an interest in that, and especially the Gaza plan of Trump mentioned and supported by Israel as well, and many countries except Turkey, because of, again, it was not part, Turkey is not part of this project. And of course, we are very skeptical with these initiatives because of the ongoing conflict in the region, but I think these are mainly the opportunities. And of course, what are the major challenges are migration issues, which is still on the table. We have the 10th anniversary of the migration crisis from 2015. But unfortunately, what we can see this year, we still see an increase of arrivals to Europe, especially from different countries, and especially here North Africa is more problematic than the Mashraq part of the Middle East. There is an opportunity in Syria to return the migrants, and it's going on. Up to date, that around 1,100,000 refugees returned to Syria, plus 900,000 IDPs. That's a huge number, and certain European countries trying to help and with financial and other help to encourage the Syrian refugees to return. Definitely, majority of them would not return, but I think what we see is a different direction from the previous years. So there is a kind of opportunity here from the migration point of view, but the problem is still there. And of course, radicalism issue we should mention as a challenge. This year is the 10th anniversary of the Paris attack, which unfortunately we remember here in the European Union, and still jihadist groups exist in Europe, and cooperation with some Middle Eastern groups. And it's true for the Middle East that ISIS is not a part of our history. It's still there and posing challenges in certain countries. So migration, radicalism are the most important challenges, and other opportunities. What I see here is definitely the EU-GCC relations, and especially it was Hungary which I would say contributed a lot to this a year ago during the Hungarian EU presidency. And because of the normative position of the European Union, somehow it was very slow to cooperate with those countries. But last year, with the first summit, I think it was a major milestone, and Hungary played an important role in that. The second summit, and especially EU-India cooperation, EU-GCC cooperation. So I think the geopolitical EU should reposition itself in the region, and for instance, this is a good opportunity, despite the fact that the two regions perceive conflicts in a different way. This is the case with the Gaza conflict, and this is the case with the war in Ukraine, which perceived differently from an EU side and from the GCC point of view. As far as Hungary is concerned, Hungary has a rich strategy, and I would say the Middle East historically is very, very important for the Hungarian foreign policy, even during the Cold War, but even before. So it continued and playing an important role politically and economically. Hungarian foreign policy is very close to Israel, supporting the security of the state of Israel, but it doesn't mean that we abandon the old Arab friends in the neighborhood, which is especially very important. You can see when Prime Minister visiting a country, or there is a UN vote where we support Israel, then next day our foreign minister is in Lebanon or in Egypt. So balancing, I think, is very important. And of course, Turkish friendship is a very important part of the Hungarian foreign policy, which based on not only just on general friendship, but on a common ideological position, how we see the world, and from another perspective, personal ties are very important in that sense. Of course, for Hungary, it's important here to mention the connectivity strategy. I think we will return to this issue. Energy and different economic corridor, we don't see them as a competitive corridors, but complementing each other's. And from the Hungarian point of view, all different types of corridor can bring benefit to the Hungarian economy. And other than that, probably it's important here to mention the support to the Christian communities in the Middle East, the Hungary Hubs program, which is still very important in countries like Syria, where next week we receive at HIIA a Christian community from Syria, and we are going to organize a public lecture next week, so you are more than welcome to attend. And Iraqi Christians as well, where the number today is around 140,000 of the Christians, and it was like 10 times bigger 10 years ago. So a complex situation, but I will stop here at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you very much. As far as I know, our house, MCC, is also involved with Danube in organizing one conference initiated by Professor Ofir Haivri, actually about the state of minorities in the Middle East, which is, as you mentioned, very important issue after everything that is going on. Of course, regional powers are from their side very much interested in that and so on. But thank you very much for this first, if I could say, introduction was already full of so many issues we could work upon. But let me start first slowly with, since Professor Bağcı mentioned Iraqi, issue, which is very interesting. Somehow people didn't follow upon that this very big, one of the three most, if I could say, problematic water conflicts in the world about Euphrates between Turkey and Iraq has been moved ahead. Some kind of agreement was coming. And of course, this project about the corridor and about movement general. So I would first ask Professor Bağcı to give us comment about this cooperation, and then generally he and Professor and General, I would like to comment a little bit about security issue in Iraq, because that was very interesting. As you mentioned, there are also very strong proxies connected with Iran as well, Shia militias, who were very quiet for the time being. Has Iraq reached maybe some level of peacefulness of internal life and so on? Let me start with Professor Bağcı first and then with the General.
Talking about the minorities in the Middle East is a very dangerous situation, because every country in the Middle East have minorities. This part of the world has been run by the big empires, Ottoman Empire, Persian Empire, Arab empires. So coming there with this Western concept of minority does not bring anything. So first of all, this. The second one, concerning the water problem, we were together in Iran before the Israelis bombed Iran. So it was from 17th to 21st of May. We had, there was an Iraqi foreign minister who said, we will have now in future more economic corridors, because Iraq is selling oil but does not have refineries. So they will try now to establish refineries and making more money. And also even the Kurdish outer region is now looking to Baghdad. Baghdad is the main hub, main provider for the entire country. So there will be also no Kurdish state in Iraq. This is, there are autonomous region, but not a Kurdish state. In the Middle East, there will be no Kurdish state at all. None of the countries have any interest to establish a Kurdish state there, neither Iran, nor Turkey, nor Syria, nor Iraq. So there will be always discussions there. There will be uprisings, fightings, but no Kurdish state. It is not allowed by the existence of the geopolitical, geostrategic realities. Water issue is very important. After this Iranian conference, I was in Iraqi television with an Iraqi academic. He was accusing Turkey that Turkey does not provide enough water. And it is going to become a problem between Turkey and Iraq. I said, in the 80s and 90s, actually, Turkey had the Peace Pipeline project. Turkey was providing every second 800 cubic meter to Syria and Iraq, although Turkey has not to do this. The official one is 500 cubic meter per second. And what is important, they have to change their agricultural structure. The water is abused, misused. They do not have modern technologies like the Chinese. Now, if you see the Chinese technology now in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, they get more production from water and from the land than ever before. Now, the question is here, Euphrates and Tigris, two important waterways. Turkey is not water-rich country. We are, through the climate change, also Turkey is facing a lot of water shortages now. Not like in Iran now because of the recent developments. But I do not expect that Turkey and Syria will have any conflict with this. The negotiations are going on, and the peace pipeline from the 90s, if we revise it and help to Syrians and to Iraqis to develop their technological level of usage of water and agriculture, then probably there will be a much better situation. And instead to accuse Turkey, they should make their house clean in this respect. But in the academic literature, we had discussions in the late 90s. For example, there will be water wars in the Middle East. Water shortage is a big problem. It is true, there is a water shortage, but it is one of the energy sources, but still in the Middle East we have more oil and gas as energy than the water.
Thank you very much. General, what's your perception of Iraq generally? And as I ask you, Shia militias were very quiet there, at least there were, we didn't have a front for the time being.
I think that the Shia militias in Iraq were amongst the first to understand that the Middle East has changed. And once they realized that, they decided that they don't want to be the next target of Israel. And they stopped launching the rockets and drones against us. There was a period of time that they used to do that almost on a daily basis. By the way, they hit some targets in Israel. They hit the targets in Eilat, in the southernmost part of Israel. They caused us damage. But when they realized that the situation has changed, and with the advice of the Americans that told the Iraqi regime that it's not a very good idea to keep launching rockets and missiles towards Israel, this has stopped, and ever since then they are playing a much more quieter role in this context, and this is good. And on top of that, the fact that we had to reach Iran in order to carry out the attack against the nuclear facilities forced us to use the new situation in Syria and Iraq and cross over these countries in order to reach Iran. And there's a lot of concern in Iran that Israel is able to do that. But fortunately we are, because otherwise we would end up with an Iran equipped with nuclear weapons, a big arsenal of nuclear weapons. This was even much worse than what happened. So I think there's a positive development in this respect. I hope there's going to be some momentum in this direction so that the Iranian regime is going to be able to convince the militias to disarm, or at least to accept that they are part of the regime and do not operate separately under Iranian control, but under Iraqi control. They are getting more and more involved in Iraqi politics. They gained quite good results in the last elections that took place last month. And with these gains come more responsibility, I hope, and we shall see them more invested in the Iraqi regime and less in fighting Israel. That is something that is a positive development, and we see a lot of positive developments in the Middle East. You know, we were asking, so the title we use is peace possible? Peace is possible. It's, if we manage to deal with the ultra-radicals that do not want to see any peace coming, then we should be able to make a breakthrough towards peace. And there's a belief in Washington that this is just behind the corner. I don't think it is behind the corner. There are still many obstacles between us and this long requested peace. But we are moving in this direction. The more weakening that we cause to the radicals, the greater the chances are that we shall be able to move towards peace. And we saw that we saw MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in Washington, saying, yes, I want to see a normalization. He has all kinds of conditions. Okay, we can work it out. But there is a will on behalf of more and more Arabs to make progress towards peace. We saw even the Palestinian Authority understands from reading the peace plan of President Trump that they have to adopt all kinds of reforms. Of course, they're trying to cheat everybody by the way they do the reforms because they want to make reform without making any reform. But they understand that they have to make reforms because the Article 19 of the peace plan, which was adopted by the Security Council, says that once the Palestinians are reformed, there's going to be a pathway towards self-determination for the Palestinians that may take the shape of statehood. Okay, so let's see some reforms. And we saw that Abu Mazen declared that he's going to stop paying salaries to terrorists. While paying salaries to terrorists, he's going to stop paying salaries to terrorists. At least he understands that he needs to do something about it. And I hope that the Europeans are going to put more pressure on him to do something real, and not just a facade of the reform. But if there are going to be reforms, then we can move forward. If Hamas gives up the control of Gaza, and we start to see a de-radicalization of Gaza, and I call upon the Qataris, the Qatari ambassador here, to understand the opportunity that lies ahead here. And if we see some de-radicalization in Gaza, then we might move towards a better situation for the Gazans and for the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians. And we can even find ways to cooperate with Turkey. Yes, but, even in the context of Syria, even though we have different opinions about certain issues, I think we have a lot of common ground. We both want to see a stable Syria. We both want to see a Syria that respects the concerns of the minorities, even though we have different opinions about how to treat the minorities, but I think we understand that the minorities should be respected. And we both don't want to see Iran playing a role in Syria. We don't want to see Hezbollah playing a role in Syria. So it's, I think we have ground for cooperation with all our neighbors in the Middle East. It's not going to be easy. There are a lot of hurdles and obstacles on the way, but we can overcome them. So in the final word, I would say that I'm optimistic.
Okay, General, can I, since we started already, you finished with touching upon Palestinian issue. Since we have the students especially here, could you give some outline of what really is Trump's idea and Trump's plan, how to come to the peace?
Well, Trump's idea is made of two stages. He had a plan in 2020, and he had another plan now. But the new plan is based also on the plan of 2020. It's mentioned in this article 19, it's mentioned. And what it means is that he believes that there can be a great future for the Palestinians once they give up their narrative of defeating Israel and throwing it to the sea. And once they accept that Israel is there to stay and Israel has the right to exist as the state of the Jewish people, then there is a chance of bringing about peace. And this peace is going to be in the benefit of everybody in the Middle East, especially the Palestinians, because they are suffering more than anybody else from the ongoing conflict. And he believes that this would enable the reconstruction once they do these reforms and lay down their arms. It will create the chance for building Gaza and for moving towards self-determination for the Palestinians and statehood, maybe statehood. That is vision, and we all are we are all very skeptical in the Middle East because we've been through all so many visions, and the Oslo vision and the Wye River vision, and every time there is a vision, and the Camp David vision, and every time there is a vision, it ends up with more terror and more war. But when this vision was presented, everybody was very skeptical about the chances that it would really lead to the release of the hostages, especially the living hostages. And thanks to the Americans, and thanks to the effort of the Israeli military, and thanks to the efforts of the mediators, and I again pointed to the ambassador of Qatar and their contribution to that, we are now in a stage where almost all hostages were released. All the living hostages were released, and this evening we learned that another body was on its way to Israel, and maybe there's only one hostage body left. So it's you got to believe in miracles in the Middle East in order to make sure that all kinds of things that seem impossible may happen. And I hope that we shall see normal relations between us and our neighbors in the Middle East. And I think that for that to happen, we have to be decisive on defeating those who don't want to see that happening. Hamas doesn't want to see that happening. Hezbollah doesn't want to see that happening. We have to make sure that they give up on their dreams for our dreams to prevail.
Thank you. Professor Csicsmann, how do you perceive Trump's idea, and how generally, if I could say, European approach is? You precisely said it's very hard to speak about one common, because we have even the countries, including Spain and Ireland, who had, if I could say, quite a radical approach by recognizing Palestinian state, whatever it might be. I'm generally very much interested what they recognize, but we can speak about technically. But how, when you perceive efforts of President Trump, actually, what do you think about possibilities that it can really contribute to the peace there?
I think the first steps were very successful, as General mentioned about the release of hostages. Especially, it was very important to bring different ideas together in one plan. I mean, the French-Saudi initiative, which was mainly focusing on the two-state solution in the United Nations, as well as Israel's vision and many other Arab countries, Turkey's vision, Indonesia's vision, and Pakistan's vision into one peace plan. So what I see as a positive step, there is a kind of minimal consensus achieved. Of course, the problems are with the details, how to implement those points, and especially I'm more pessimistic at the moment with the implementation, and especially what we see in Gaza is potentially dividing the Gaza Strip into two parts, the Israeli administered part and the Hamas administered part, and it seems not many states interested in to contribute to the international stabilization force, which is a problem. We know that Turkey and Israel vision and conflict on this issue, but as far as I know, it's only Indonesia at the moment which has a willingness to implement and to contribute to the international stabilization force. So there are many questions. And other problem, yeah, you can defeat Hamas militarily quite easy, but to defeat the ideology and to provide perspective for a generation which was living not only under occupation but a huge humanitarian suffering, it's not easy. The ideology you cannot defeat, but there is a consensus among the Arab countries, Israel, that Hamas should be disarmed. And I think that's a very positive common point where we can start. But it takes, unfortunately, more time to implement this and more diplomatic engagement. It seems the very moment more attention paid on the Ukraine front and negotiations. And what was, very interesting recently when Mohammed bin Salman paid a visit to the White House, he mediated, or I just reading something interesting, that there were 3 preconditions of the United States to relaunch talks with Iran. So that was, I think, an important point, that US is still trying to consider that should nuclear talks relaunch with Iran. Of course, to stop uranium enrichment at home. Second is limit the ballistic missiles program. And third is, of course, about the proxies and the role of proxies in the Middle East. Of course, Iran rejected at the moment these preconditions, but I think still there is a window of opportunity to engage Iranians, because we see a kind of crisis there, and the conflict between, simplifying the things, between the conservative hardliners and the pragmatists like Pezeshkian and Arakci, with more willingness to cooperate and to launch talks with Western countries. From the European point of view, the European Union itself, what I see, is more skeptical with the peace plan. I just saw a map on this peace plan, how Europeans are divided. It's, quite similar to the position related to Israel. So Hungary is supporting this plan, but many other countries are skeptical or even rejecting the plan. Especially some countries would like to see more concrete things about the two-state solution, because the plan itself is too general. about the self-determination of the Palestinian population. So here the normative principles have been playing an important role in shaping the European opinion on this, but I would say Europe is very much divided on the peace plan. But let's give a chance to the plan, because any kind of diplomatic engagement is better than continuing the war. So that's very positive, especially release of hostages. I think it's a very important turning point everywhere. That's quite positive.
Please, just if we could explain for the sake of students here, I'm generally very interested in Spain or Ireland, for example, recognize, as they say, state of Palestine. What does it mean? I mean, which state do they recognize? Yeah. How they can communicate with non-existent, if I could say? What does it mean in practical or legal terms?
Not much, honestly speaking. So it's more a political, symbolic decision. The state of Palestine declared its independence in 1988, and it is about accepting this independence declaration, which Hungary accepted too in 1988, because at that time we were in the Cold War, last phases of the Cold War period. But honestly speaking, it doesn't change the reality on ground. So it will not affect anything in the region. Probably it's a good point for the internal audience as well. So here the internal affairs playing an important role. As you know, there were many protests ongoing in those countries, which can shape politics as well. So it's a bit complicated too, because each country is different in that sense, but I think this is the case with most of the countries.
Thank you. General as well.
If I may add one word about that, I think that the last resolution of the Security Council that adopted the peace plan of President Trump makes a mockery of all these countries that recognize the state of Palestine, because it says that there is no state of Palestine, and that only that if there are going to be reforms of the Palestinians, then there might be a pathway that may lead to some sort of self-determination that may take the case of statehood. All of that has to happen before there's going to be a state for the Palestinians. So, and everybody supported this plan. So it's very clear that they recognize nothing. Thank
you very much. Professor Bağcı, in May, you said, defining what happened in Syria, if I can quote or paraphrase, basically you said, we win, like Turkey win, Russia lost, Iranian lost, and you said English win as well. Yo, could you give us a little bit about, we spoke of course about the, let me say, regional powers and the countries who have interest because living there. Could you comment about development and the role of the big powers? We mentioned, of course, USA that is involved again, British that are always present there in a way, if I could say, and China was mostly staying out of everything for the last couple of years, and Russia, after going out from Syria, as you know, they are occupied with their problems in Ukraine. And could you tell us about how big powers are actually perceiving that and what's their role in all of this?
Yes. Just recently in China, 2 weeks ago, we had a big conference and talking from Caucasia to Central Asia, from there to the Middle East. All the countries were represented there, academics, intellectuals. America is there and will be there. This is the grand strategy of the United States of America under Trump. And America is a non-normative power. It's not like the European Union. It's a more transactional, give and take, and very pragmatic. And all the leaders in the Middle East are very pragmatic people, and the pragmatic leaders take pragmatic decisions. Like the German Prime Minister visited Turkey recently, I made a comment to German television ARD. I said, Merz, the Prime Minister is a pragmatic one, Turkish President is a pragmatic. Two pragmatics will take pragmatic decisions. Even the European Union is now moving slowly from the normative power to transactional one. In all my discussions, I see this very clearly. The Middle East, ladies and gentlemen, is entering into a new phase where the big powers, the classical powers there has been France and Britain since the Sykes-Picot Treaty from 1916. But now we have China, we have America, and we have increasingly India. Britain is not member of the European Union, as we know, so they make much more different policy there concerning the energy, oil production in the north of Syria, in Qamishli region. The British invest strongly. Also, the train ways will be conducted. Britain and Sweden provided just last week very strong credits for the restructuring of the highways and create new railways. So the goods via Turkey can be transferred to Gulf and from Gulf to this side. Even the Caucasian countries have now much more different perspective. Look to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan and Syrian relations, for example. Azerbaijan-Israeli relations. Russia is the loser, no doubt about it. I was very determined to say it. There are two basic losers. This is Iran and Russia. With Russia and Iran, Turkey was having the Astana process. Astana process was dedicated to control and save the territorial integrity of Syrian state under Bashar Assad. It was in Astana. Now even the Kazakhs said is not anymore necessary. Get off from this title. And now we have since 1 year a new regime there. The difference between old regime and the new regime is maybe in the structural way, fine, but as a state is the same. There is not a new state in Syria. In Syria is the old state with all responsibilities and rights there. The question is how Syria is making its relations to those great powers, America, China, India, European Union, and Russia. Mr. Shara was visiting White House. He visited Moscow. The European countries will also put red teppich, as in German it is said, and also is visiting the entire regional countries, Arab countries supporting him. Syria is part of Arab League. So Arab League is in itself has great interest that Syria is stable. Egypt is very important. You may not forget that in 1959 to 1961, 1963, we had Syrian and Egyptian state. Once again, geopolitically and geoeconomically speaking, the value of the Middle East is increasing also after the Israeli politics towards Iran. Iran is the loser in this sense with my Iranian friends. When I do talk, most of them are not happy with this, but it is so. They are the loser because of these proxies in Lebanon, in Yemen. They cannot do anymore as before. And Turkish foreign minister was just 2 days ago in Iran, and I followed the press conference, both of them, and they talk commonly, they try to create a common rhetoric to the Middle East, but we know the Iranian perspective towards Middle East is not the same the Turkish one. One is more ideological, Iranian one. The Turkish one is much more pragmatic, and I agree with you. Israel and Turkey will never fight against each other. There are some discussions even in Turkey that Israel would attack Turkey. I said nonsense. Never it will be the case. Technically, it is not possible. We are a member of NATO. If Israel attacks Turkey, then Israel attacks a NATO country. It cannot function. Turkey is one who provided that Israel can make military maneuvers also with NATO forces. And from our history, in the entire 90s, the Israeli air forces trained in Turkey in Konya. So the jet fighters made their maneuver there, and on the way to Israel, they went 200 kilometers inside of Syria, took the pictures of PKK camps, and then provided to Turkish government. The Turks and the Israelis have done in the 90s such a close cooperation as never before. But also not forget, Turkey is the first country, Muslim country, which recognized Israel after 8 months its establishment in 1949. So another information maybe for the students is important. The founder of Israel, Ben Gurion, was a student, law student in Istanbul in the years from 1910, 15. I mean, the Turkish presence in the Middle East was in those years as an empire since Balfour Declaration. We have a different approach to Middle East because of our historical background or baggage, if you want. Even with Syria. I mean, Syria, Damascus, Aleppo, they have been Ottoman empires, if you want, regions which was controlled from Istanbul government by the Sultan. Pan-Islamism was Ottoman foreign policy in the 19th century. Today, Israel and Turkey actually are two countries, economically speaking, I would say, they need each other more. And all this rhetoric, I may say this, the Turkish rhetoric against Israel is for domestic consumption. Israeli rhetoric against Turkey is domestic consumption. Both guys, this is the Netanyahu and President Erdogan, they know each other and they want to keep their position. In the year 2023, just a couple of weeks before 7th of October, in the United Nations, Netanyahu and President Erdogan met, and this is important, they should learn it. Here, it was like this, red tie, 100 years of Turkish Republic, flag, and then white shirt. And he was on the way to come to Turkey to visit. And a couple of months ago, in May, the Israeli President Isaac Herzog came to Ankara, and he was in Külliye, at the presidential palace, with 120 soldiers on the horses, escorting him from the Atatürk Mausoleum to presidential palace. The question is here, classically speaking, Turkey and Israel have never had policies against each other. No. Even Hamas case will not change it. Turkey is a diplomatic player with Qatar, with Egypt. Turkey is using its diplomatic skills there, no doubt, but any military confrontation between Turkey and Israel is not possible. It is possible between Iran and Turkey, but not between Iran and Israel and Turkey.
Thank you very much for that. Since we are approaching slowly the end, and sorry that I urged you a little bit. There are a couple of issues I would like to address, and then we could give a little bit floor to our guests. First, I want to emphasize really when I started actually speaking about the gentleman. This was really, we are teaching the students also diplomatic practices. So I can tell you this is really one of the best diplomatic presentation of actually the tensions that are more than that, because Turkey and Israel really do have some open issue this way. But I'm more than thankful for both of you how you presented realistically from different perspectives, and still we could learn quite a lot about that. Question for László, actually returning back, we passed briefly through all of that. We could speak a lot about Yemen, about many of the things happening, but crucially, the question now are for the future, Iran. And what's going to be the position of Iran in the future? As we all know, there are internal debates also. Usually people refer to, let me say, more pragmatic or liberal approach, or more radical or revolutionary, as they say, which is connected with the guard and so on. I was also in May in Iran there, and I remember actually before the bombing, when we asked them about what do they expect, they were putting quite a lot of hopes in President Trump negotiation and so on. We know what happened after that. And what's your prospect, which side, if I could say, might win within this internal debate about reorientation? Should they finally go for more practical, pragmatic way, which would mean opening and accepting actually the International Agency for energy, nuclear energy, or the other side, which insists more on the conflicting approach and which is publicly saying that this agency is unacceptable because allegedly it is just giving the data to their enemies and so on. So what's your prospects, and how much actually general peace at the Middle East can depend on that?
Of course, it's not easy to predict at the moment, but what really we can see that the regime is in crisis. It's a political crisis, economic crisis as well. There is a water shortage. Before that, it was an electricity shortage when we've been there. So there are multiple layers of crisis, in my opinion, which can lead to a slow transformation of the regime. But if you are reading the newspapers in Iran, they are expecting the next war, Israeli attack on Iran, and they are preparing for that, purchasing new defense equipments from Russia and from other sources. So I think this is the narrative shaping the realities at the moment, which means that unfortunately, from the point of view of talks or negotiations, it seems not the pragmatists are the winners at the moment. Probably it's temporary situation, but I think at the moment the conservatives and the IRGC blocking the potentials of negotiations. There were some small steps. For instance, a few weeks ago they released the French couple spending years in prison, which can be a sign of cooperation, willingness to cooperate with European countries as well. And Iran joined to a UN agreement on money laundering, which was very important in my opinion. So there are signs that Iran is open to talk, but on the other hand, when Iranians been invited to Sharm el-Sheikh summit by the Trump administration, they rejected because they still not accepting the two-state solution, and because of many other things. So I think these are missed opportunities for the Iranian, and especially the most important goal for the regime today is survival. What we see is, I think, a slow erosion of the position of the supreme leader. This is especially during the 12 days war and aftermath, and probably it's a transformation towards more an IRGC or something like that, led regime in Iran. The question is, of course, how will satisfy the citizens, but Iran is not a democratic country, so definitely not the citizens will shape the future, in my opinion. And especially here in Europe and Western countries, we have a kind of image about the middle class of Tehran, which is very much Western-oriented. But I think the reality, if you go to the countryside, is very, very different from that perspective. Let me stop here and let's see, Professor.
I have to ask General about that, and after that, please.
Just one sentence.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a new book which has the title Iran's Grand Strategy by Wali Nasser. It is a must reading for everyone who tries to understand Iran's position. Israelis read it anyway. So the Iran's grand strategy is important. What they do is actually, according to Wali Nasser, the Iranian Shiism is reflected in the Iranian nationalism, actually. And we cannot neglect Iran. Iran is very important. When I say Iran is the loser, Iran is the loser at the moment. But Iran is not a loser forever. There should be a correction. Iran is a geopolitical, geostrategic, geolocation point of view, very important country, one of our neighbors. And without understanding the Iran grand strategy, it is always lacking. Israelis can do whatever they want. Iranians will never, never give up the nuclear program. Never. It is a national grand strategy.
Thank you. General, what do you think about possibility of what Csicsmann, Professor Csicsmann said, that the Iranians are actually waiting or preparing for a new war?
Well, Iran has not decided yet what's going to happen. I think this battle between the pragmatists and the radicals goes on, and the decision of the supreme leader is waiting and is deferring the decision. He's not taking a decision so far. And I think he believes that he has time. The question is whether he has time or not. And I think that to a large extent I tend to agree with Professor Bağcı that this Iranian regime is not going to give up on enrichment.
Any Iranian regime doesn't.
No. I think that another Iranian regime may give up on that. This Iranian regime is not. Because for this Iranian regime, the nuclear capabilities are part of a grand strategy, as you said, that is determined to spread the message of radical Islam according to the Iranian interpretation throughout the Middle East and beyond the Middle East, throughout the world. That's their mission. But another regime can take a different approach and say, okay, we want to be good Muslims, but it doesn't mean that we have to export Islam to everywhere else. And we have to put the interests of Iran, as the people of Iran, higher than the interest of spreading Islam all over the world. And that's why we don't need nuclear capabilities. And we have to focus on using our resources in order to improve the living conditions of the people of Iran. That would be a nice change. So I think that what we need to see happening is a change of regime in Iran. It's not going to happen tomorrow morning. It takes a long time, and it's up to the Iranian people to make it happen. And but you know, when the hatred to the regime in Iran is so high that the chances are that something is going to be used as a spark, and something is going to be ignited, and there's going to be a change in Iran. Not tomorrow morning, unfortunately, but you know, they don't have electricity, they don't have water, they don't have money. The real has collapsed. The situation is extremely bad because of this regime. They know who is responsible for the suffering, not Israel. The responsibility for the suffering of the Iranian people lies flatly on the Iranian regime. Everybody knows that. So I think that there is a chance that somebody is going to wake up and do something about it. And they lost the opportunity that was presented to them by our attack on June. And that's why the Iranian regime is so cautious not to provoke another one, because they are afraid that this time the reaction of the Iranian people is going to be different. But at the same time, and I agree with you, that if they are going to show too much pragmatism and be ready to give up on the nuclear enrichment, then they are afraid that this is going to be interpreted by the people of Iran as a sign of weakness and call for action against the regime. So it's whatever they do is a lose-lose situation. That's where they are stuck. They are stuck in a lose-lose situation. I'm afraid that one of the way out of this lose-lose situation is going to be escalation. Let's run forward, and instead of running backwards. And this is going to be very dangerous. This is true also for Hamas. This is true also for Islam, for Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're all worried that this very dire situation that the radicals are find themselves in is going to lead to escalation. We have to be worried about that, and we have to be prepared for such an eventuality.
Okay, we still have like 8-9 minutes. So, are there questions? Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mazen. I'm from Lebanon, and I used to be an intern at HIIA. And my question would be around the role of Hungary in the Middle East. As we know, Hungary is a great ally to the US, Israel, and Lebanon alike. So do you think Hungary could be able to enter mediation talks to reduce tension between Lebanon and Israel? And would it be able to pressure a favorable peace process and accelerate it? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Hungary, I think, is in good relation with both countries, and that's, I think, a very important position of the Hungarian foreign policy to communicate with everyone. And very recently, Hungary provided a lot of equipments to the Lebanese military as well. So it was very important to strengthen the Lebanese state against Hezbollah. So definitely mediation is a very important part of the story. I have no idea whether anything is going on in this, but we know that on the Ukraine side there is. So especially building on that opportunity, probably there are other opportunities in the Middle East, and because Hungary has good relation with both countries, it can be a mediator, of course.
Connectivity for everyone.
Connectivity is very important.
Okay, do we have some more or comment, or please?
Just say that we are very thankful for Hungary for its policy, because it cannot be taken for granted.
Mike. Just microphone.
I think that we are very thankful to Hungary for the courage it shows, and it's never taken for granted in Israel that we have this such great relationship with Hungary. If this is going to be helpful in bringing about solutions to the problems we have with our neighbors, all the better.
I want to thank you really from the heart about the way you approach the thing. First, I think that we all learned quite a lot. We got some fantastic overview about where we are, what are the problems, maybe not so optimistic outlines at the end. On the other hand, we got some very realistic perception in this quite a crazy world that is in some kind of transition, but it was fantastic to get them. Let me finish with some, since General started with a debate about the internal affairs of division. What is happening, if you allow me, with your own countries, which are, of course, main players, especially nowadays? How much, let me say, internal politics might affect different strategies? That's a very interesting question. On one hand, in Israel, we de facto have minority government, and before that there were big protests. People forgot actually that I personally, let me comment on something ideologically. I think that the biggest win for Mr. Netanyahu was fight against the Supreme Court of Justice, which was very big internal issue, very interesting actually, but I mean, there were very interesting internal dynamics. Then Turkey also, which had recently quite an interesting local elections in which opposition went then the protest, of course, So my question to let me finish, how, let me say, internal and foreign policies of your countries may be connected in the future?
Well, I think that in Israel there's an ongoing, very heated debate internally on a variety of issues. Most important is the relationship between the opposition and the coalition regarding the continuation of government under Netanyahu. But I think the impact it has on foreign policy is limited. The government is the government. They take decisions. They enjoy the majority in the Knesset. They are not making the decisions because they are afraid about the opposition. And they have to invest in domestic issues because they want to stay in power, and they have all kinds of problems with the Haredis about the conscription law and other matters. But as long as they don't reach a dead end, and so far they managed to somehow navigate without reaching the dead end, they can continue making decisions regarding the foreign policy and the military decisions quite safely and soundly, and not worry about the opposition. The opposition doesn't have the power.
Thank you very much. And Hüseyin Bey.
Turkey is still a democratic country. We are negotiating with the European Union. We are a member of NATO. We are a security provider country in this region. With all the neighboring countries, Turkey has a balance of power policy. Turkey is at the moment facing certain difficulties, definitely concerning some domestic developments. which I'm not expert on it. So I'm just going and giving my vote, but expert I'm not. This is another thing, to become expert on domestic politics. But I can talk about foreign policy, much easier for me, because it's my field. Concerning the foreign policy, Turkey's geostrategic, geopolitical, and geoeconomic value has increased and is getting more and more increasing like gold in international markets. So none of the big powers, also the regional powers, can oversee the Turkish values. That is why Turkey is now using this connectivity policies from Middle East to Caucasia, Central Asia, West Balkans, Europe. Turkey is getting more important for European security than ever before. I finish with this. I talked with a German politician from the government. He said, Professor Bağcı, your domestic problems are your problems. With your democracy, you can solve it. We don't care about it. What we care is the transactional relations. We will do business with Turkey in international politics. The last visit of Merz, he said, after the visit, he said, we will continue to work with Turkey. It is not normative-based or value-based policy of Germany anymore. And also it is for the entire Europe. So Turkey is getting more valuable, and it is good so.
Unfortunately, I don't have time to give to Professor Csicsmann about, I'm joking a little bit, about the Hungarian internal and foreign politics, you know. We will leave that aside, you know, a little bit joke to finish. Thank you very much for staying with us all these 90 minutes. It was more than worth of that. And very great welcome again, and my gratefulness to the guests, which really gave us, I think, fantastic overview of where we are heading, and if peace is possible at all. We hope for that, but I think there's a long way, a road ahead of that. But at least, you know, pray for not further escalation upon that. General Hüseyin Bey, Professor Csicsmann, thank you very much for being with us here.